I'm going to ask the Notebook LM here a fun question here. Who or what controls interest rate policy in the United States? Really? I'm thinking about all those first-time home buyers having to buy mortgages at 7.5% interest rates at the time of this recording. Domestic policy encompasses a wide range of issues and topics within our country's borders. We'll focus on two critical areas when I'm talking about domestic outputs, economic policy, and social and welfare policy. So, in terms of economic policy, we think about fiscal and monetary tools the government purports to utilize, possess, grow, change. And there's two main sets of tools here. So, in terms of fiscal policy, that concept refers to the government's taxing and spending decisions, primarily controlled by Congress and the president. Tax policy. Since the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, which took over for the first and then second National Bank of the United States, and then the ratification of the 16th Amendment, which allowed for the federal income tax, controversion of the original document. Tax policy has been a central tool and a battleground in terms of politics and policy outputs. Key changes and ongoing debates include the progressivity of the tax code. The degree to which tax rates increase with income has been a topic of much dispute. When the income tax was initially introduced, it was only on the very wealthy that had to pay that tax. The U.S. generally has had a progressive tax income system to try to preserve the capital that middle class and lower middle class individuals can accrue within the system. But rates and tax brackets have changed significantly over time. Debates rage over the fairness of the economic impact of the tax policy, lower rates stimulating growth versus higher rates funding services, reducing inequality, etc. There's other sources of revenue as well. Reliance on income taxes, payroll taxes, and excise taxes has led to, and all the deficits we've been running have led to talk of old tariffs and things like that to try to come up with a shortfall for the trillions of dollars we're spending every year that we don't have the courage to raise every year. There's also loopholes, deductions, credits that reduce tax burdens for specific activities or groups, the mortgage interest deduction, all the blue states clamoring for SALT deductions. They don't want to pay taxes on the taxes they've already paid at the local level. The federal government says, break rocks. Government spending on defense, infrastructure, social programs. Interest on the debt is the fastest growing element of what we're paying into. We're paying more toward interest than we are in defense currently in 2025. And the national debt itself becomes a significant challenge here in terms of what controls interest rates. It's also monetary policy. So that was all fiscal policy, but we talk about monetary policy, which is distinct. This would refer to actions taken by the bank to manage the money supply and interest rates, or to attempt to manipulate interest rates. The Fed, their primary goal is typically maximum employment, as many people working as possible, and stable prices, as low of inflation as possible. They have a 2% target rate. They should actually just target deflation is what they should do. But I digress. One of the main tools the Federal Reserve Bank claims it has is setting the discount rate, the interest rate at which commercial banks can borrow money directly from the Fed, the overnight rate. By manipulating that, they can put pressure on short-term interest rates. There's reserve requirements. The fraction of deposits banks must hold in reserve can influence the supply of money. They cranked that up after the Great Recession, for instance. And then there's open market operations, which have been incredibly controversial since the Great Recession, 2008. The buying and selling of government securities bonds. It's the most frequently used tool. The Federal Reserve Bank bought up trillions of dollars of mortgage-backed securities after the crisis in 2008, for example, in their attempt to increase or decrease the money supply available to banks for lending and generally goose the markets in the way that would make Keynes blush. The interplay between fiscal and monetary policy shapes overall economic conditions in the United States, affecting growth, employment, and inflation in subtle ways that plays out over time. These policies inherently involve government intervention in the economy, sparking massive debates rooted in differing economic philosophies and views on economic freedom versus collective economic management. The rise of the welfare state really dominated the 20th century. Prior to the 20th century, social welfare was largely considered a private or local matter for charities, neighborhoods, communities. The Great Depression fundamentally changed this American perspective, leading to significant expansion of federal involvement in the economy that we witnessed firsthand with the COVID crisis. So we had the New Deal in the 1930s. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, as president, talks about how we have only fear itself to fear. And he helped sort of basically create the the welfare state as we understand it, inspired by other countries, including Germany at the time. Most enduring aspect of the welfare state of this period is Social Security. The law passed 1935, providing retirement income, disability benefits, survivor benefits through payroll taxation. Other New Deal programs included unemployment relief, which came very late and sort of in a patchwork manner, work programs, i.e., the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Works Progress Administration, and then financial regulations, FCC, things like that, the backstop on the FDIC insurance, etc. Then there was a Great Society in the 1960s under LBJ, who very much looked back to FDR for some of these programs. Johnson's initiatives further expanded social programs focused on ending poverty, the war on poverty, the war on drugs under Nixon, but then racial injustice well with LBJ. Key programs would include Medicare, health insurance for the elderly, funded again by payroll taxes, and Medicaid, health insurance for the poor, jointly funded by the federal and state governments. Food stamps, now referred to as SNAP, federal aid to education from the federal government to the schools, housing assistance programs, HUD, also expanded significantly across the 60s under these Great Society guns and butter program during the time of Vietnam. Other entitlement programs have grown and been reformed over time as well. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid are entitlement programs, meaning folks have to be eligible to receive those benefits. Spending on these programs is mandatory unless the law itself has changed. These have become very much the third rail in American politics. You don't touch it. It's electrified. The soonest way you could exit politics is by touching one of these major entitlement programs. The whole system is very much designed to rest on a growing population with GDP that's growing, economic output that's growing. The whole thing is a bit of a Ponzi scheme. And so as we have more folks graying out of our workforce and fewer babies being born and fewer immigrants coming to the United States as well, it becomes much harder to fund all these programs. And here we are faced with a bit of a crisis when it comes to how we'll fund these programs in the years ahead as America looks toward austerity and leanness. Expansion of all these programs across the 20th century reflected a definite societal shift that's unlikely to change much, though, accepting a greater government role in providing economic security and opportunity, especially during times of crisis. However, these remain subjects of intense debate regarding cost effectiveness and impact on individual responsibility. And the COVID pandemic sort of shined a light on some of these debates. Think the PPP loans, all the corruption there. These debates often pit values of compassion and social solidarity against concerns about government coercion through taxation and potential dependency, to say nothing of the actual cost. We run a $2 trillion deficit in a time of peace currently. Who will actually pay for the bills we don't lack the courage to pay? That's the question the future will have to answer.